Yes, guys, so I'm Josh. I run Split Test Marketing. We're an email marketing and retention agency specifically for e-commerce brands. And I've been doing it for a while now. And I thought, what I want to start doing is just giving some free value to you guys, kind of showing the sort of things that we do and hopefully help you out and see how you can grow your brand through retention and kind of scale through retention and lifetime value of your customers. So I thought, what better way to start it than a full retention audit and a full email audit that you can use for your brand, and you can kind of see where these bottlenecks might be, and then in later videos you'll be able to see how you can implement different strategies in order to improve them. So what I've done is I've got all kind of the information from all of my documents that I use from my Notion, Google Drive, etc., put them all into this PowerPoint here. And yeah, hopefully it's valuable. There's various different things we do. So we're not just purely email, we're full retention. So we have various different strategies for different types of businesses. And yeah, I hope you find it useful. So let's get into it. So what this audit will specifically help you find is it's going to help you find the constraints that you have in your business, the channel, so whether email actually is your biggest bottleneck or whether you can be doing retention in other areas, the benchmarks, so the sort of numbers that you can try and compare against so you can maybe see where these constraints may be more easily, and then an idea of what to test first within your business. And so hopefully you'll leave here with like a ranked diagnosis sheet of what you need to go and sort out first, second, third, and fourth, and then what are kind of the lowest leverage things that just are a little bit pointless to go out and see. So the way that I see a lot of people trying to audit, and the way that I think is totally wrong, is they prescribe stuff before they understand what happens with a brand. And so the usual thing is that people will tell you to set up more flows, send more emails, and get a better converting pop-up. But that assumes that that your issues lie directly within your email, and they indicate that everyone has the same kind of retention issues, which is just not true in my experience. Maybe with other people it is, but not with me. So what I like to do is I like to take the approach of asking, observing, kind of this is where the audit comes in. We diagnose within the audit, and then from there we create kind of a bespoke strategy that we use. And I always like the analogy that a doctor doesn't write the prescription before finding out what is wrong, and so a retention audit shouldn't do it either. If you went to the doctors and they told you what medicine you were getting without you even telling them what was wrong with you, you wouldn't be very confident that it would work, which is why I don't like all these templated flows that you can input into your business, because I just don't think they work as well as something more bespoke and more strategized to you specifically. So what are we going to go through in general? Number one, the commercial picture. So these are kind of the things like the revenue map, the channels that you sell through, your average order value, the type of products that you sell. Then we're going to look at, is email actually the lever? Because in a lot of cases now with things like TikTok Shop, eBay, whatnot, a lot of live selling, email isn't necessarily the biggest lever for you in terms of retention and lifetime value. So we'll look at things like the traffic through your site, the access we have to data, and the kind of the first decision that we'll make when we start looking at your brand. Then we will go down into the email system audit. So although I'm a big proponent of email not necessarily being the biggest lever, in 80% of cases, it still is kind of one of the biggest things that you can do to work on your retention. Then we'll look at alternative mechanisms. So for that 20% that email maybe isn't the biggest mover of the needle. And then finally, we'll help you rank your kind of issues in terms of most to least important, so you can see what to test first. So we're called Split Test Marketing. I like to test things. I'm a big data person, so I think regardless of what something looks like or how it comes across, the results are always in the data. So you might have the best designed emails in the world, but if they take you an hour per email and you can get the same emails made in 5 minutes and they perform just as well, in my eyes, saving 12 times the time, doing it in 12 times less time is much more valuable, even if the email doesn't look as good. But let's go straight into it. So number one, we need to establish the commercial picture. So we need to map where the revenue is coming from, and then we can decide where to look. Sorry, by the way, if I'm stuttering over my words or anything. First time, so it's to be expected. Hopefully, it's valuable enough that you don't skip anyway. So, what are we going to include in this kind of more of an overview audit than it would be a super strategic, because this could go on for 3-4 hours if we were to go super deep into some of the stuff here. So we're going to look at your revenue channels, your Shopify and email performance, your acquisition versus retention signals, your capture, your flows, your campaigns, segmentation, deliverability, so all of your email specific stuff, your average order value, your product type. Not mentioned there is other things like whether you've got consumable goods, whether you've got high or low SKU, but we'll be looking at them too. Your core kind of repeat purchase rate, your subscription and return signals, and your alternative retention channels. And then if you book a call with us and you want us to kind of look deeper, we'll do a similar type of audit to this, but then what we'll do is we'll also include things like support ticket analysis, so looking at kind of what your customers might ask for, what they're asking for help with, and kind of seeing where we can include that maybe in your email strategy, fulfillment economics, much more detailed product research. A big one is full cohort modeling. And so a big thing nowadays with kind of the growth of, I suppose kind of with like the big focus that everyone has on acquisition, you get totally different cohorts that come into your business and want to buy. And so by breaking down your customers into cohorts of kind of intent, when they buy, what they might buy, we can get really detailed on how to retain customers differently, because I always maintain the idea that the best thing we can do is try and retain your best customers first and get the most value out of them, as opposed to trying to persuade your lowest intent customers to buy more, because it's just hard. It's much easier to get someone who likes your brand to buy again than it is to persuade someone who isn't bothered to buy for the first or second time. And then finally, customer interviews and detailed channel specific audits. So really kind of much more detail. Like I say, they're kind of things we go to on the actual call. If you will call that, we'll do it totally for free for you, and hopefully you can find it valuable. So for now, you can find it, kind of see all these things that's included, and hopefully find them valuable. So let's move on. So what do we need to have open? So if you're on your computer now, you can pause this video, get these two things up, and then as you move through the video, you can kind of go back, reference your numbers, write them down, make a note of them, and you can kind of compare them against the sort of recommendations that we have. Other things, you probably won't need them for now, but in general, Google Analytics or GA4, which is they're good because they can sometimes, the mailing platforms can be a little bit weak in terms of tracking, whereas Google Analytics is super accurate. Your subscription platform, if applicable, advertising, just so you can have an idea of kind of what your cost of acquisition is. Marketplace revenue figures, you should be able to find them on Shopify, so where you sell from. And then kind of anything like your WhatsApp, SMS kind of fits in with the email platform, but WhatsApp loyalty and referral numbers if applicable. And so the 5 commercial questions that we want to ask, and you can note down now, that are going to be kind of the biggest impacts on how we conduct this audit is: what's your monthly revenue? So what does your revenue do month by month? You can, on Shopify, they'll often show your gross sales and your net sales. I'd recommend looking at your net sales, because that takes into account things like discounts and returns. And so what is your total monthly revenue? I'd get your net, like I say. Where does that come from? So this is where we talk about channels. This is where we're looking at, does it come from email? Does it come from, not email, sorry, does it come from Shopify? Does it come from TikTok? Does it come from whatnot, eBay? Make a note of that and look at the kind of percentages that they do and note these down. What percentage of Shopify revenue is attributed to email? So this is a vital number when it comes to understanding whether email is a big needle mover for you. Approximate AOV, once again, you can find that on your Shopify dashboard. I would find it either we're in August now, so year to date is probably the most accurate. You can have a look more historically, or you can have a look within a short time frame. It depends on kind of what your product and offer has done recently. So if you've recently got loads of new products in, or you've recently kind of increased the price on anything, you might want to look more recently. If you've kind of always had very similar pricing, always had the same product, then your AOV will be more accurate if you spread it across over more time. Returning customer rate, you should also be able to find on Shopify, and your approximate cost of acquisition. And so this is kind of the one that you might not be able to find on, you won't be able to find on Shopify, sorry. I am not someone who does ads or anything like that, but I would imagine as an owner of a business, you'll have an idea of what your cost of acquisition is. This is vital because it kind of gives us an idea of how much we need to increase the lifetime value of the customer so you can start scaling your ads more profitably and kind of with more margin. And then finally, what product do you sell? What type of product? And what should the second order look like? So if you're a subscription-based service, you have a very different type of second purchase to someone who's selling like luxury fashion. And so this is worth noting down. These 5 things are all the things that are going to feed into that one central investigation that we're going to conduct to kind of try and really nitpick through what is the big thing that we need to work on here. And so what we're going to do next, we're going to draw the revenue map. So every channel connects to your total brand revenue, but only some let you own the customer relationship. And this is vital because when you own the customer relationship, as you can see on the left here, you receive customer data, you can capture permission, identify them post-purchase, and measure repeat behavior. So like on Shopify, you have access to the first-party data, but obviously marketing still requires consent. But if you sell directly through Shopify through your online store, then you're going to be able to collect data quite well, which is why things like pop-ups work so well, why opt-ins, like marketing opt-ins work well. But because of the nature of how e-commerce is going now and how there's just such a massive push towards things like TikTok Shop or Whatnot Live, it's really hard. It's becoming quite hard to get customer data in comparison to what it was like a few years ago when these things weren't so big. And TikTok specifically that I've seen is so popular now. And TikTok Shop is just so easy to shop from. Like you're at most 3 clicks away from buying something on TikTok Shop, whereas unless maybe an ad shows up on someone's feed, they're always more than 3 clicks away from going through your online store. And as is a known fact in marketing and in general, the more friction you have between seeing your product and buying your product, the less likely someone is. And you'll be able to see these on graphs, like people just drop off the deeper down the funnel they go because it's too much effort, I suppose, people nowadays with people's such short dopamine spans. So waffled on a bit there, but so we have TikTok Shop, customer access typically restricted. The people can opt in, but it's very hard. If not, you'll see it on mailing platforms. You get these random emails. You can't email them. TikTok wants to keep its own proprietary data, so like you're never going to be able to get as much details as you want. eBay, same issue. Amazon's mentioned here, but often people kind of separate Amazon and Shopify when they sell, and so you can have a look at that if you need to. But usually it's different because people have their own Amazon accounts, and so or they sell for Amazon independently of Shopify too. Whatnot is similar to eBay and TikTok. Retail and wholesale. Retail is obviously what we'll be looking at, but wholesale, if you have a wholesale business that runs through your same Shopify store, then that's worth checking because it's obviously 2 different business models. And then other marketplaces where I'm not sure what other ones there might be. Maybe I suppose if you sell through like Vinted and stuff like that. But here we've got the warning sign where a retention system cannot depend on customer data the brand never receives. And this is kind of the big thing that I've mentioned in the past that I keep thinking that doesn't worry me, but I think it stops a lot of people really retaining customers very well because everyone's so focused on email and like your pop-up needs to be 10%, you need to have this flows, you need to send 3 campaigns a week. And like if you can't grow your email list, if you can't afford to pay the Google ads that are going to get people to your site, if you can't run meta ads that are going to get people pushed to a landing page that are going to collect your details, and how do you expect to retain your customers? Because they're not just going to remember you off your own back unless you're like the most unbelievable magic brand ever that no one ever churns from, which is just unrealistic. And so now we've got all these details. So we've got kind of where your main revenue drivers are, etc. All this kind of stuff, all these kind of core details. We need to decide whether email actually is the big lever because not every brand is. And so how do we do this? We follow this decision tree. Does your store receive meaningful traffic? What I mean by this is if, for example, when we want to run a test on a pop-up for someone that we work with, we need bare minimum of 1,000 impressions in order to, this is a bare minimum, usually we want a lot more than this, but a bare minimum of 1,000 impressions to see kind of which side of the test is going to win. If you are struggling to get like 1,000 impressions in a couple of days or a week even, you probably don't have enough traffic on your store to really be kind of optimizing for a pop-up. In general, if you run Google ads to your store and they convert well, so if you kind of have, I'd imagine anything above like a 3-to-1 ROAS on your Google ads, which might be high. Like I say, I don't know about ads. I just know what people that I work with, what kind of numbers they get. And the people that have anything above that have a lot of site traffic, which is really good because it means we can capture loads of people, and email is probably a very big lever. So if no, the immediate constraint is likely acquisition. Email cannot retain customers who never reach the store. So this is what we mentioned. If you can't pay for Google ads, if you can't pay for Meta ads, whatever, you're not getting enough people to your store, then you have an acquisition problem more than you probably have a retention problem, unless you'll see in a minute. And so, does the brand have meaningful reachable list or an effective capture mechanism? So this is kind of questioning that whole, do you have a way of collecting emails specifically? Because if not, like you're primarily selling through TikTok, then you need to investigate capture before rebuilding the email program. This is a mistake that I made with one of the people I worked with just first, whereby we assumed email was the lever that was going to kind of take them from X number to Y number. Their email was at like 0.5% of store revenue. We optimized email to high heaven, and yet we still couldn't get it high enough. And I don't want to get too far into detail with that, just because we'll get onto it later on because there's more detail on it. But if we've answered yes to the first question, yes to the second question, we move on to the last one. Is email materially underperforming the brand's historical baseline and directional best benchmarks? So yes, email the audit system. Audit the email system, not email the audit system. So we need to audit the email system. So here is where, if we have traffic to our site and we have a way that's going to be able to catch people, and yet email is still underperforming, email probably is your biggest lever in terms of your retention systems. If no, so if we've gone through any of these and answered no, then we probably have a different constraint that might not be email. That means we need to try and retain customers or capture customers in a different way. So in this final question, no, email might not be the primary constraint. Investigate acquisition, the product model, or another retention mechanism. And so if we've answered they all were based off, does most revenue come through the owned store? So by the owned store, I mean, if someone goes onto your website URL and buy from there, that would be your main channel. You can see this on your Shopify dashboard. Most brands, I would imagine, unless you primarily sell through something like TikTok or eBay or whatnot, you'll be on this left-hand side. I just have worked with people who are on this right-hand side, and which is why we've developed strategies to kind of work differently. So if you are on the no side immediately, then can marketplace customers be identified or moved into an own audience? So if yes, if you can capture these people in some way, we need to then investigate marketplace to owned capture. So what is the mechanism that we can get them from this alternative marketplace into our owned ecosystem, i.e. email, SMS? And if no, then we need to investigate channel native retention. So marketplace followers, i.e. really optimizing our content production, live selling access. So this is important for TikTok live, whatnot live, and eBay. How do we optimize to get more people on the lives and get them coming back on the lives and buying on the lives? Or can we get them from these channels where we can't get their own access, but can we get them into a community of ours or into some kind of VIP membership where they deliberately come to you and ask to be added in a way? And you will see more on this further through the presentation. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at brand A versus brand B. So brand A does most of the revenue through Shopify, they have meaningful website traffic, they have customer data available, they have almost no email revenue, and they have their primary opportunity is their email system. Whereas brand B, Shopify, is only 10 to 20% of total revenue. Email is roughly 80% of Shopify revenue, which basically means that for the money that goes through the direct Shopify store, around 80% of it is attributed to email. It's not that the actual whole store as a whole does 80% through email. Most sales occur on marketplaces. Customer details are difficult to capture. Primary opportunity, marketplace to owned retention. Now, I probably shouldn't have put the primary opportunity at the bottom of both of these, because I would have liked to see whether I explained it well enough for people to predict it themselves. But what you probably can try and predict is these two sides have a totally different thing. Now, would you, if you were in my position or you were in an agency like mine's position, would you imagine that these things have a similar retention mechanism? Because in a way, this is how they are now treated. This in 2026, the way that these two brands are treated is very similar, but they just don't match up to the realistic kind of way that the marketplace is moving in terms of the channels that people are selling through. So let's keep looking. So here's how we would diagnose brand data. So this, by the way, is two brands I have worked directly with, and this is what we did when we diagnosed their problems and gave them a bit of an audit. So brand A, the mechanism, they've got own traffic, they've got customer data available, they've got little email revenue, and they have which means they have a missing or underperforming lifestyle system. So we need to look at these things. We know that email is probably the biggest driver for these guys. So we're looking at pop-up and identification, their core flows, their campaign frequency, their segmentation, their deliverability, their offer testing, and their creative testing. So the creative testing for us is not much of a lever, but if we get to a point where email massively shoots up and becomes a real high percentage, like over 50% of store revenue, then at that point we go to the people who work with them on the ad side and we say, we've got LTV up massively high, we've got retention up, email is no longer kind of something holding this brand back, acquisition is, so we can start to help tell them they can start scaling ad spend more. And this is why retention is so valuable, because a lot of people don't understand that retention is the thing that frees up acquisition. Because I remember Holmosy talking about it. He has so many business owners that come to him when he does these live workshops, and they say to him, I keep scaling ad spend, the margins get tighter and tighter and tighter, how do I scale my business? And the same thing always comes back, which is you need to, in some form or another, you need to retain customers, you need to have a better retention infrastructure built. But all of these things that we're going to investigate, we will go through them in more detail soon. Instead, now we're going to look at brand B. So the mechanism that they work through, they have a marketplace demand. So we know that people want the stuff that they're selling. They are making money. They have customers coming to them time and time again. But they have very little owned traffic. They have limited customer data, and email already monetizes Shopify well. And what I mean by this when I say email already monetizes Shopify well is email was optimized, because this is one of the brands where we looked and kind of, with the naive view that I used to hold, that email was the core driver, we just optimized email to high heaven, and we got email to like 80% of store revenue. And then I remember looking at it and kind of thinking, well, what do we do now? Because I can't really help them anymore. I can't get email to 100% of store revenue. Their store revenue, which I'll keep reiterating, this is purely from the online store, the URL. We can't get that to 100%, because at that point we just need them to sell more. And I remember watching a video, shout out, so Max, well copy Max, so he's kind of one of the big guys that I've learned a lot of my stuff from. And I remember seeing one of his things, and he said if email is way over 50%, then you have an acquisition problem and not an email problem. And I never really thought about it like that, but I kind of realized that then email isn't the biggest lever for this brand. And when I spoke to the owner, he basically said that the issue is it's such a competitive space where these guys are working, and they don't currently make enough revenue to kind of really outspend everyone on Google Ads and outbid everyone. And so we were stuck between like a rock and a hard place, where it's like, well, we can't improve LTV through email, and we can't spend anymore because we don't make enough to spend. And so it was like, well, what do we do? And so here we had to start investigating things like marketplace to owned capture. And so that basically means, how do we get people from a different marketplace where they really try and keep that information to themselves, and how do we get them into our audience so we have direct control of what they hear from us and how often they hear from us? How do we do things like send certain packaging or certain post-purchase invitations to get these people's contact details? How can we maybe build something like a VIP group, so specifically maybe in WhatsApp? How do we optimize their live selling and their follow-ups within the live selling? Can we build something like a loyalty program which keeps customers coming back to that same brand as opposed to going to other brands in the same niche? Exclusive product access kind of sits within this VIP stuff. And then how do we get channel native retention, which basically means that, like, how, if we sell primarily through TikTok, how do we retain customers on TikTok? Well, it's by growing your TikTok page and getting more people into your lives on TikTok. And so here it says about email still matters. It is just simply not where the next hour creates the most value. And that's what I want us to kind of get to. I want us to get to a point at the end where you're able to look at your brand and think, well, where is the biggest lever? If it's, most likely it will be email, but if it's not, then where is it? And what can we do to kind of increase that LTV? And like I keep mentioning, by increasing LTV, you can spend more on acquiring customers. And if we just get into a couple of numbers now about email marketing specifically. So if your email marketing on your store, or it's most likely it's easiest, to find it on your mailing service provider, so Klaviyo, OmniSend, MailChimp even. If you're below 40%, then investigate the email opportunity. If you're around 40%, then we can start inspecting the system quality and the balance. So kind of this is the point at which we can really try to optimize the systems to push them towards that 50, 60%. And if you're already far above 40% when we look at your brand, then we need to investigate the acquisition constraint. And we aren't an acquisition company, we're not focused on things like ads, but what we can do is push you towards agencies that might be able to help you with your acquisition, and then you can come back to us and be like, right, now we acquire customers, email percentage has dropped a bit, how do we get it back to that kind of optimal level? The directional benchmark though is 40% of owned store revenue is attributed to email. And so we need to find these emails, and then what we want to do is we want to compare them. If this bear in mind is if we are understanding already that email is if you're kind of thinking about this now and you're thinking, yeah, I think email could be the core driver. If you've looked at your Klaviyo account and it says 20% of store revenue is through Klaviyo, you probably know that somewhere within your email you need to optimize. And so here are the numbers that we're going to look at. Total revenue, Shopify revenue, site visitors, conversion rate, average order value. These are things that are going to be very independent. These are going to be things that are very dependent, on your brand. So these are going to be hyper specific to your brand, and we can't tell you that you need to be aiming for a certain AOV because that's not how it works. You need to be looking at your return customer rate, your repeat purchase rate, your approximate cost of acquisition, your LTV to CAC. And I know everyone probably hears that if you can have your LTV to CAC at 3-1, you're a good business. Anything above 3-1 is hyper scalable. And so that's kind of the goal we're going for. The issue that obviously we find a lot is cost of acquisition keeps increasing and LTV remains pretty stagnant. And so people have a lower than 3-1 LTV to CAC, and their margins are super tight, which means that they basically always have to spend more in order to feel like they have to grow and eventually get to this point where they just can't afford to even spend anymore, or whatever they spend just is not valuable. Then we have email attributed revenue, flow revenue, campaign revenue, list size, pop-up conversion, their health, so the unsubscribe rate, the spam complaints, bounce rates, attribution window. So these things like the health, these are usually not an issue unless you're someone that, if you've been sending to a list that is just totally irrelevant, that they're imported from somewhere, and you get super low open rates, super low click rates, you will start ending up in spam. And these should be hopefully like a one-time check. But that's something we'll look at, and it's very rare that you're going to have an extremely high unsubscribe rate and an extremely high spam complaint rate. So Health, I suppose, is the biggest lever. If it's bad, it's just for most people, it isn't bad. Um, in terms of all the other stuff, I can give you numbers on kind of what you need to be aiming for. So we have we want to be at 40% email attributed revenue. We want around 40% of that to be flow revenue. We want around 60% then to be campaign revenue. Your list size is obviously dependent on how much site traffic you get and how big you are. Your pop-up conversion, we want to be pushing towards 10%. So as close to 10% as we can get, the better. And this will probably show if you run successful ads and you run successful at Meta ads or Google ads, getting people to your website. If they're high intent people, your pop-ups should be performing well. If you're getting low intent customers, you might have a lower pop-up, and this is where we start testing. And this is just obviously, once again, when we go further deeper into the audit, this is the sort of things where we look. So I say all that because I don't want to start telling you what your approximate CAC should be, what your repeat purchase rate should be, or your returning customer rate, just because it's so dependent on the brand, and so it's worth checking. And then what I would do personally is I would search up. There's so much access to kind of details now that you can search up for your specific brand what kind of are the industry benchmarks and compare against that. But you should always be comparing. You should make notes of these, and you will see if you compare them to benchmarks within your industry, kind of where the improvements need to be made. So step 1, record your current numbers. Step 2, compare these to the directional target. So I've given you the things like the flow revenue, the campaign revenue, pop-up conversion. See what they might mean. So see what that gap could be and what might be causing it. And then you decide where to focus. This is where I like to kind of differentiate a little bit away from brands. And I know I keep talking about it in terms of the different retention mechanisms, but in terms of email specifically as well, I think there is a big issue whereby so much stuff is templatized for speed, and so much kind of strategy is given that's kind of very it's all very samey, if that makes sense. It's all very the same advice is given to the same brand, and that whole analogy of would you give the same email strategy to Louis Vuitton that you would give to McDonald's? No, probably not. There'll be a lot of kind of best practices that might stay similar between the two, but you're never going to tell people to have the exact same strategy. And so here are kind of the things that you can be looking at to kind of see how you might have to slightly tweak your strategy. And if we were to build your strategy out for you, how we would kind of tweak your strategy based on the type of business you have. So if you're a lower AOV business, you have a faster buying decision, you have more room for direct product-led emails, you have replenishment or cross-sell that may happen sooner. You're probably likely, if you're a lower AOV, this is a lot of the subscription brands, and so they're going to have a very certain type of email where they're trying to get customers not to churn, and we're trying to keep repeating purchases on a long time horizon. Whereas if we're a higher AOV, we need more trust. So I think I remember looking at, I think it was the luxury clothing and bags, and there was something like 60. You need something like 63 touch points. I don't know if I've just made that number up. I hope I haven't. Or I remember there's 63 touch points or something ridiculous before people really want to buy. And so this is that whole point of you can't start just throwing £1,000 products in people's faces. Like you might do with AOV for something that costs 20 quid. You need to give them this longer consideration cycle. You need proof. You need to show customer testimonials, maybe a lot more than you might have to with a lower AOV. Reassurance, education, brand story. Education and brand story carry more weight, and the next order may take longer. So this is where we might get into more detail in terms of your customer cohorts, and where we look at kind of what kind of cycle the different cohorts buy on, and then we have to play into that cycle. And it just says it here: do not prescribe the same welcome sequence to a £25 consumable and a £500 considered purchase. The thing is similar things going to happen in both. They just kind of need little tweaks if you want to optimize it and get the best results possible. But let's move on. And so here's and I just wrote this down really quickly, kind of not, there's obviously going to be nuance within this, and so don't take this as gospel when you look at kind of things that we're saying here. But in general, what should your second order be? If we're looking at retention, where do we want the second order to be? If you're a consumable product, it's going to be replenishment or subscription. If you're a subscription, continued use and churn prevention, they cross over a bit because you might be a consumable that someone buys on a one-time purchase. We want to get you onto a subscription, so we have to like do things like tweak the offer or kind of help push people towards a subscription if they paid from a one-time purchase. That's all we're talking about there. Multi-SKU catalog, so complementary product or category expansion. So this is where we want someone who might buy something that is, you imagine you have a really broad number of products, kind of what product might come with it. So if you were to sell, for example, let me think, if you were to sell like giftware, let's say like a whiskey glass, then the logical next move from that is to upsell them to something like, let's say some like whiskey stones. So they're things that we've helped people sell before. So an upsell might be whiskey stones to go inside the whiskey glass. Or how do we get people to move from kind of the whiskey glass itself into different categories but of the same thing? One or two SKUs, so this is one or two things. People who might sell like a certain powder. So when you look at, I think like IMA or Marsmen, Groons, they all sell that. I've not really looked at them in too much detail, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, they sell one or two different products. They'll have very different landing pages and stuff like that, but in general, it's one type of product. Here we need education, so we need to keep educating them on why the brand's so good. We need replenishment. We need to help them replenish. We need to offer bundles or get referrals. High AOV, durable, i.e. things that people are going to spend a lot of money on and are going to last them a long time. So they're probably not going to continue buying the same thing. Think of something like a sofa. People aren't going to continue buying sofa. The buying cycle is much longer. How can we offer accessories, gifting, a certain service to them, or advocacy? And finally, marketplace-led brands. So the next action for these sort of people is, do we try and offer them this VIP access? Do we offer them community or an owned channel migration? So this is where we're trying to get people off, say, TikTok or off eBay and onto a platform that we own, and we have to think about the certain mechanisms we can use to do that. In general, if there is no sensible answer to what they should buy next, more emails will not just magically manufacture one. And so here is some headline retention signals. So we want to be looking at the returning customer rate, which is a core health metric, repeat purchase rate, where it's available, return or refund rate, which is a quality signal, subscription cancellation rate, churn indicator, obvious cancellation spikes, flag anomalies, time to second order if you can get it, and your approximate LTV to CAC, which is just kind of your headline ratio. Once again, these are kind of the numbers you will find that will indicate how strong or weak your retention is and where you can focus it. What I don't want to do is start telling you specific numbers like what your, apart from LTV to CAC, which we kind of know in general, if you sit above 3-1, you're in a good position in terms of scalability. I don't want to tell you what your numbers should be. What you're best doing is finding industry benchmarks based off these numbers and kind of comparing your number against. So an easy example is time to second order. So if you were to sell like, I don't know, headphones like this, how long would the industry average be between buying that pair and buying another pair of the same thing, which will be a much longer time to collect? When you think about something like this, that it should be like kind of a luxury long-term product, it's going to be much longer. And so we compare that's maybe not going to be a big lever, but how can we sell other things within that kind of make that first purchase more valuable and make them more valuable in the long term? So now open your email platform. So only after you understand where revenue comes from, what order to should be, and whether email can reach the customer. So if you know all these three things, then we can move on to looking at your email platform specifically. We're going to look at first attribution, then deliverability, then capture, then flows, then campaigns, segmentation, and testing. So first we want to fix your measurement. So you want to check your attribution window. So how long after an amount of intent by a customer do you attribute that sale to them? So various platforms give various different numbers, but they're kind of, there's like some platforms will go 30-day click, 30-day open, which is a massive attribution window because it indicates on day one someone clicks your email, and if they buy something almost a month later, that's attributed to that email. If that's kind of the last touch they had, if that was the last email they opened, it would be a bit you would get attributed. So that's probably too long. The most accurate, the one that I like to use, is I would use 3 to 5 day click on 1 day open. So if someone's opened your email in the last day, or they've clicked within the last 3 to 5 days, then you can say with a degree of certainty that they have been influenced by by that email to make a purchase. Open attributed versus click attributed, like I've just mentioned them. Open attributed is lower intent than a click. A click's much more higher intent. The Shopify integration, I would assume if you're watching this video, you have Shopify integrated into your mailing platform. If not, then you need to, so you can kind of look at the statistics properly. Conversion events, so what happens to make someone convert, whether shipping or unrelated messages receive revenue credit. So this happened in the past with us, whereby a shipping confirmation was taking the attribution. So like the shipping confirmation would have like 800 quid worth of attribution, and everything else would have zero. Just obviously that's a mistake. So if that starts to occur, then you obviously need to stop tracking clicks and opens on that specific email, and it will move it back to the last touch before that one, and you will get more realistic statistics. And having a consistent baseline measurement. So when you first go into audit your account, capture all of these numbers, and then these are going to be the ones that you compare against in the future. An observed fact is what the data directly proved. The interpretation then from this observed fact is what it might mean, and the forecast is what a change might produce. So we want to be kind of going through this cycle, and it might sound simple, but what you can start to do sometimes is you can start to forecast what you should be doing before you know any observed fact or any interpretation. I mean, I've made this mistake before. I've just mentioned it, whereby I thought email was a big lever for this brand. In reality, it was a massively low level in comparison to everything else. Once you've got your measurement, then deliverability is always going to be the ceiling. And this is what I kind of mentioned in the past, whereby you need to make sure that you're sending domain, you've got SPF, DKIM, DMARC set up, your bounce rate isn't high, your spam complaints aren't high, you've not got loads of unsubscribes, you're getting engagement, you're not doing sudden volume changes. So one thing that I see a lot of people do is I'll say, we'll set up your flows and campaigns, and people have never sent emails before, and then all of a sudden they just start blasting a list with like 3-4 emails a week. They start sending like 4 different campaigns, and it's just, that's obviously going to lead to flags on these mailing platforms. Then if we look at suppression and list hygiene, so oftentimes suppressing a proportion of your list is going to help you more than it's going to hinder you, because if you have a massive list but the deliverability on it's crap, then no one's going to buy regardless of how big it is. So I would rather have 500 people who are actually engaged than 20,000 unengaged, because you will just end up in a spam every time if you send 20,000 unengaged people. Just notes to make here is, do not confuse promotions with spam. So the mailing platforms are getting really good at knowing what type of email is what, and so oftentimes you are going to end up in promotions. Most brands that I get emails off, regardless of how good they are, will end up in my promotions tab. It's very rare that they don't. We can obviously optimize to land in the main inbox, but promotions isn't necessarily a really bad indicator. Spam is a very bad indicator. We do not want to be ending up in the spam. And I subscribe to quite a lot of brands. Most of them are good, but there is at least 3 or 4 examples of people I can think who are known people and known brands that end up in spam, and I don't even think they necessarily realize that they are, and because it just isn't something people look at. Open rates are directional. Privacy features can inflate them. So like Apple Mail automatically opens a lot of images to check the contents of it, and so sometimes some platforms do well at kind of indicating what has been opened by the Apple privacy feature, but other ones might not be. So you can have really high open rates that are they're not actually that high. So generally your clicks, orders, revenue per recipient, and your complaints provide stronger evidence. But yeah, deliverability shouldn't be a big kind of, it shouldn't be a big thing. Once it's sorted, it's sorted. And as long as you just don't do anything stupid, you will always be fine with it. And once we move on to that, we can start looking at the pop-up and capture. So the benchmark for your first pop-up will often be around 2.5%. And once again, shout out to Well Copy Max. He's someone that I kind of got these statistics from, kind of to use as my benchmark as I've been kind of growing my agency. So 2.5% would be the benchmark for your first pop-up. So when you first make it live over the first couple of weeks. It may well be lower if you have massive amounts of store of traffic. If you have certain types of people going to your store. So many different explanations as to why it might be a bit lower, but it doesn't matter. When you first make it, it doesn't matter. In the longer term, you want it to get it increased, but whatever it is when you start, you can always increase it. Then as you're growing it, once you've got it up for a while, you kind of need it. You want 4 should be the bare minimum. You want to push towards 7, and great is anything 10+%. As I've previously mentioned, traffic volume is always going to affect the confidence of the result. And so to check these points, you need to check these things. You have enough traffic for a meaningful sample. So when we mentioned further back, when we said about how many site visitors do you get, you need to make sure you have enough traffic so that the pop-up is genuinely valuable and the amount of people who are coming into it is genuinely going to drive some kind of revenue change. You need to check that it's easily exitable, because nothing is going to make your website convert worse than a pop-up showing up that someone can't get rid of. This is a big thing that I see. A lot of agencies will basically get your email, get the pop-up numbers super high because they just don't give a shit about letting people exit the pop-up, but then your website conversions just go down. So you actually make less money, but your pop-up shows be making good amounts of money. And so this is kind of a big thing. If your conversion rate on your website is going down because of your pop-up, then we need to change something, because obviously it is, well, you just don't want to have lower website conversions because of a pop-up. Sensible timing. So you probably don't, it's worth testing, but you probably don't want a pop-up to show up the instant someone goes on your page, because you don't even know what level of intent, whether they've mistakenly clicked. And once again, it just might impact your website conversion rate. You want to wait enough time such that there's at least a kind of reasonable amount of intent that they're deliberately on your site before you show them a pop-up. 1 input per step. So you're not going to say to someone to give your email and phone number at the exact same time. We want to start making them make micro commitments to move through, because it's this whole idea of once I've done this thing, all I might as well. It happens to me all the time. I sign up to emails to review what they look like. I get hit by a pop-up. I know what they're doing. I still every time now get to the phone number. I'm like, oh, God's fuck's sake, I don't want to receive text off them. But because I've already gone that far, I just put my phone number in. So one per step, you have a button opt-in. You've clicked that shows level of intent, moves them to the email stage. I think, oh, I've already done it. I've already clicked it. I want my discount or whatever now. I might as well put my email in. Move one more step on. Oh, well, I've already clicked a button and I've already put my email in. Might as well just put my phone number in. Offer matches acquisition messaging. Obviously, you can't say to people on like an ad that we're going to give you 15% off and then give them 10% off. Or you can't say we're going to give you store credit and then you give them 10% off. That's just a clear one. Your incentive is actually delivered. So a big thing that I see what people have an issue with is if you want to improve your welcome flow. So if we're talking about a pop-up here, most people will send their welcome discount, if that's what they're giving, or their free shipping code or whatever it may be. They'll send it in the first welcome email, which should fire instantly once someone's added to your list. And the reason they do this is because they want to improve kind of like open rates and click rates on their email for deliverability reasons. But then people sign up and they wait and they wait and they wait and they just don't receive the welcome email. And so all that time that the email isn't sending to them with their discount code in or whatever it is, you're just reducing the chances that this person is going to purchase with you. So you need to be making sure, and it's worth testing, that your emails fire instantly. And this is where better mailing platforms like Klaviyo and OmniSend are going to be better, because they're always going to be more accurately sending emails out pretty instantly. Then another clear one, which is correct welcome flow entry. Make sure if people are signing up to the pop-up, they are correctly going into the welcome flow. The wrong people aren't receiving the pop-up for that matter. And then check mobile versus desktop performance. So some purchases might be made more likely on a desktop, some might be made more on a phone. So maybe it's changing a bit now, but like if I think back, let's say if you were to purchase something like a flight, I know it's not an e-commerce purchase, but if you purchase something like a flight, it's quite a, in my head, I just used to think of it as a big purchase, so I would always do it on a laptop. Or if I was going to purchase like a sofa or a bed online, then I would do it on my laptop for whatever reason is in my head. I would be doing it on there, and so you need to be kind of optimizing it for where your customers are going to be shopping with you. And you can go on Google Analytics, or I think you can see on Shopify as well to see where most people are on your site and optimize it for that. Moving on, flow coverage. So we have our core flows, which is 7, and this is literally just the point at which someone enters your site, they browse, they add to cart, they go to checkout, they purchase, they need to purchase again. You need to have a flow that captures people every single point of this. So you have your welcome flow, which is as they enter the site. You have site abandon, so they go on your site, they look around, they don't even click on a product. That's the lowest intent. Browse abandon, they click on a product, they have a look, they scroll to description, but they don't add to cart. That's a little. These are, I'm not going to keep repeating, but these are obviously going to go up in intent. The amount of intent is increased with each one, so we have to develop the flow specific to that. But browse abandon, they browse product, they don't add it to cart. Cart abandon, they've now added it to cart and they've abandoned their cart, so they've not gone to checkout. Checkout abandon, from my experience, checkout abandons are pretty rare. Like a lot of people, once they've got to checkout, will convert, but it's still worth having in case someone goes to the checkout page and then leaves at the checkout page. Often this can be because of something like unexpected costs. So it's like when you go on fucking Deliveroo and you've got 15, like you think your order's gonna be like 15 quid, and then you go to the checkout button and it's like 25 quid because they've added service charges, delivery charges, driver fee, all that shit. So you're like, that will be where checkout abandon might become important, but generally for e-com brands, it's not super ridiculous. Post-purchase, so what do we do after we've sent them the product? So this is worth a flow because you can upsell them, you can cross-sell them, you can, if it's a certain product you have to do something with, like a consumable or like kind of a something along that line, you might want to educate them on how to use your product or how to get the most out of the product, so you increase the customer experience. And then finally, win back. So let's say someone's purchased with you but they've not purchased in 90 days, then we want to kind of try and reconvert these people and get them back interested in the brand. There is some relevant additions to this, so something like VIP, I've imported into someone I worked with post-purchase. So when someone buys with these guys, they get an invite to the VIP group. And so this just sits in our post-purchase flow. Returning customer, you might have a back in stock. If you have a certain type of product that sells out, that's quite popular, you might have a back in stock flow, so you don't have to send manual campaigns. Review request probably would sit under post-purchase as well, as opposed to a separate email. Subscription lifecycle is a super important one for subscription brands, obviously. Failed payment, also important, particularly for subscription brands. Category specific journeys, so it basically just means you don't have to send campaigns, you just have automatic emails that go out for certain things that might happen, or when certain products are made, or when certain things are happening. It's category specific journeys I'd just kind of ignore unless you're really trying to get into the weeds about it. Number of flows is not the score, coverage, trigger health, and commercial purpose matter. So that's a big thing that I think there's this whole general, again, gist of like, I will give you 15 different flows that are going to look like, yeah, but no one gives a fuck about 15 flows if none of them make you any money. So you need the core 7 will make you more money. The other ones might, but they won't necessarily. So make the core 7. That's your biggest lever. Optimize them and then start thinking about adding other things. So how do we audit one flow? This is meant to have blurred flow analytics here, but unfortunately we've not been able to add it in. But in general, what you would have is trigger, you would have people that you would exclude, you would have entrants, email count, click rate, order rate, revenue per recipient, the best and weakest email. So trigger, what happens, how do people get into the flow? So abandoning cart would be they abandon a cart and it may be like is an hour ago. So you make sure you have that note that that's correct and it's running properly, so people are entering the flow properly. If you're not receiving any complaints and you're not getting loads of unsubscribed from your flows, you can generally assume that your trigger's working fine. Exclusions, so this is where you want to check if you're adding the right people to your flow. Because, for example, if you have pushed someone through a welcome flow, you generally don't want to be adding them to, let's say, your site abandon, browse abandon, any of your abandonment flows until they've gone through the welcome flow fully. And the same thing, like if someone's received imagine you had a flow that was 2 emails long for your site abandon. If after the first site abandon email, they move to browse abandon, they move to the browse, sorry, not necessarily browse abandon, they move to browsing, you don't want them to then receive another email saying that they've not been on the site, because it's just going to become annoying and people will get pissed off because they'll think, what are you talking about? Entrance, very similar thing. Email count is just how many emails you're sending. Your click rate and your order rate and your revenue per recipient are all important numbers, so you want to check these and kind of compare them against each other. And your best and weakest email. So what we want to be doing is we want to be checking things like, which is, if let's say your third email is your best performing email, then if we move it to say your first email, then do we see a better performance in the flow as a whole? Or if we have a 4 email long flow and your best performing email is your last one, then do we add another email at the end of it to capture the people that have kind of had that really strong email but still kind of haven't bought, and we have one more? Because usually if your best converting email is your last email, you need to add another email behind it. And then this is what we want to do. So we're going to read the flow pattern. So performance is still rising, so intent may still be present. Test 1 additional email against the existing sequence. So this is as if your performance of your flow is getting better for each step of the flow. Then we want to add another one to see if it continues to rise, or after that one it might drop off, and then we kind of know that, right, let's say 4 emails. That 4 email sequence is perfect, and at 5 we're not getting any additional orders, so there's no point having it, and we're sending it, and it might just lead to poor deliverability scores. So if performance is decaying normally, then the sequence would behave as expected. This doesn't obviously prove it's a correct length, so you want to check incremental revenue, unsubscribes, and complaints. But generally, we want the highest performance email to be first, and each one of them after that to gradually decay, as opposed to it's still rising. Final emails produce nothing. That's kind of back to what I said about performance or rising. Test removing them or changing their purpose for extending the sequence. This is again where that whole thing of like more isn't necessarily better. Often it can be, but it isn't necessarily better. And these are just some different like types of tests you can run. Usually your most valuable will be your offer. So always in e-commerce, your biggest leverage is your offer, but we can test things like a social proof email, text-based email, the timing between emails, the order of your email, so how you order them, and whether you add an additional email at the end. Once again, I'm not going to tell you to necessarily definitely send a text-based email, very dependent on your brand. If you want to have a look through this, then you can go through to our book call with us and we will do this for you. This is just kind of going over the same thing, journey overlap, so I won't spend loads of time on this, but the deepest intent takes priority. Earlier flows exit when a deep action occurs. This just goes back to that. You don't want someone who's got the site abandoned email to get the next one if they've already gone to view a product. So more sending works when every message has a job. Checkout abandonation most important, site abandonation least important, because checkout had the highest intent. Post-purchase. So this is just some details on what they should be, so you can look at the emails that you send already and see whether they meet these requirements. So they should reduce a buyer's remorse. So if it's something where a buyer, if it's an expensive thing, or kind of like it might be an impulse purchase, the sort of thing that you sell, then we need to reduce the buyer's remorse. How do we do that? Various different ways. We might educate them on the product. There might be a guarantee on the offer that if they don't love the product, we'll give them money back, and we let them know about this in the post-purchase. Set usage and delivery expectations. So when will they get it delivered? That's a big thing. Nothing's more annoying than ordering something, telling it's going to be delivered and it's a week late. And you set usage. So the usage thing is a big thing, because if you're doing something that's like a consumable and you say this, and you know it works within 90 days, then you can't say that this is going to work for you within 30 days, because you'll get loads of people churning because they think it's been 30 days and nothing's happened, when you know that it should take 90 days to kick in. And so your post-purchase tells them that you have to use this consistently for 90 days, and then you can see whether it works or not. Again, build trust, so you're just reminding them what they do, how it works, how well it's worked for everyone else. Introduce next logical action, so that's very dependent on your brand. Collect reviews, useful information, and prepare order 2. Whereas the win back should reflect the product, reflect the likely repurchase window, separate customers from non-customers, avoid treating every lapsed customer the same. This is where we go into more detail in terms of customer cohorts, in terms of intent and stuff like that. When people have bought, if they've bought on a sale, they might not necessarily be wanting to come back on a full price. So do we email them when we know a sale's coming up? Here we're going to be testing timing, your message, and your offer to them. A calendar date is not a retention strategy. So now we've gone through all the flows. I know that was a lot, that was heavy. It even started to get too heavy on me explaining it by the end of it. But flow versus campaign revenue. So if you make a lot of your money through the flows, then your automation may be strong, your campaign planning is probably weak. Campaign heavy, then manual sends are carrying the account, always on journey may be missing, which basically just means that you want to be at about 60% campaign, 40% flow. 50-50 is fine. Like it says here, use the imbalance to choose where to investigate. So if you are totally away from one of them, if campaigns are too low, it's campaigns that you need to work on, flows to work on. So before we just get onto this next bit, what I can kind of, hopefully you're following kind of the journey here. So you've seen these top level numbers, and you kind of now it's breaking down to these smaller pieces. So we're moving from like email doesn't make enough money to the welcome flow, email 3 might not be making enough money. And this is why I think it's important to really go from the top, break it down logically, and move down from here. So if we've looked at the flows, we're going to look at the campaign frequency. So here are the inputs. Because campaign frequency, again, you'll get told that you need to send 1 per week if you make X amount per month, 2 per week if you make Y amount per month. Yeah, that's kind of true, but it's so much more specific than that. And so we want to blend it. So here are all the different inputs that we need to think about. Your monthly store revenue, probably the biggest driver, alongside your total list size. On top of that, engaged segment size, historical send frequency, deliverability, content quality, product range, buying cadence. Like I say, most valuable, monthly store revenue, total list size. The bigger your monthly store revenue, the bigger your list size, the more you send per week. I know I follow brands that send me like 4 or 5 emails a week. They're always the ones at the top of mind. But if it was a brand who I'd never heard from before, and they weren't very big, if you have a list of a few hundred people and you're sending them 5 emails a week and your list isn't growing, they're going to get annoyed at you, regardless of what people say about campaign frequency being the biggest lever. But if you're barely sending now, which is quite a lot of people, most of the people I've worked with had this issue, and so I just think it's worth making a note. You want to start from the brand's current sustainable frequency, which means that we don't want to start blasting out loads of emails all of a sudden to a list that is unengaged, or even to an engaged list, because it's a bit of a shock to the system and we don't want to destroy deliverability. So we're going to send initially to the engaged core. So you have to kind of find what this engaged core is, and it's going to be a proportion of your list. So it might be clicked within the last 60 days. It might be clicked within the last 60 days, opened within the last 30 days. It might be a purchase. And the way that I would probably recommend finding this is I would take your full list size and I would keep cutting it down until the number gets too small. So if you have a list of, say, 10,000 people, then you apply filters. So you might apply like the clicked in the last 60 days and it's like 4,000 people. And then you add the, clicked in the last clicked in the last 7 days, I don't know, and it's like 500 people. That's probably a bit too small. Your list is much bigger than that, 20 times bigger than that. So maybe then you expand the click to the last 14 days and it opens it up to 900 people. And then you might add opened within the last 7 days, opens it up to 1,500 people. Then at this point, it's a decision that you want to make depending on how much you send. If you never send anything, the tighter your list, the better when you first start, because promise me, you do not want to destroy deliverability. It's the worst thing you can possibly do. So start small. Doesn't have to be too small, but start small and gradually open it out until you get to them optimized numbers of 40% opens and at least 1% clicks. We probably want to get more than that at first, but if you want to reach the bare minimum, 40% open, 1% click. Monitor them things. As mentioned, if the account remains healthy, add 1 campaign per week. So once we've got her engaged core, so you might send 1 campaign in week 1, 2 campaigns in week 2, 3 campaigns in week 3. If you're a big brand and you want to send more, 4 campaigns in week 4. You can keep adding campaigns. And this is why a lot of people say that more is better, because sometimes if you have a good brand and you have a good product and you have a growing list, then more can be better. It's just more isn't always better. So it's just something worth checking. If you increase to 4 campaigns per week, unsubscribes rise, revenue doesn't really rise, then you know that 3 kind of is your limit for them, and you just test on that every month or so. Just to change across several sends, not one campaign. So the numbers, you don't just assume that like you've magically solved deliverability because one campaign gets opens and clicks. You have to test it over at least a few to see whether it's really realistic. Expand frequency or audience gradually. So do not jump from occasional campaigns to daily sends because a benchmark told you to. This is that biggest thing that I keep mentioning it again and again and again. Just because everyone tells you that you should be sending 3 campaigns per week because you make £250,000 a month or whatever, doesn't mean you necessarily should be. So let's have a quick look at the actual quality of your campaign. So review the last 30 to 90 days. How many sends per week have you done? What segments have you used? What's the revenue per recipient? Click rate, order rate, unsubscribe rate, complaint rate, offer type, discount frequency, product coverage, trust building content, A/B tests, reuse of winning ideas. These are all things that you need to write down and you can compare against. So if your click rate is 0.2%, you know that click rate is an issue, and so you need to address your click rate. That is going to be the same thing with all of these. What's your offer? Offer is usually the biggest lever. So if everything's high but people aren't purchasing, maybe when they get to your page, the offer isn't strong enough. Maybe you're not making the offer clear enough. Going back to the click rate, maybe if you're not getting high click rates, you need to include buttons higher up in your email. These are all things that are obviously the kind of prescription to the diagnosis. This is trying to be a diagnosis, so I'm not going to continue to try and give you advice based off of what you find out. Sending more useful emails keeps brand top of mind. Sending more filler email creates fatigue. So recently, for example, I signed up to 8 Sleep. I get an absolute shitload of emails and text messages off them. They're a good brand. I would buy from them, and so they don't annoy me by sending because I'm actually interested in their product. If I signed up for a brand they also send very valuable emails. If I sign up for a brand and they just send me annoying stuff constantly, it just immediately I would unsubscribe and I wouldn't open their emails, which is what destroys people's open rates and deliverability. If we look at your segmentation now, so in terms of the customer lifestyle, each life cycle, each stage deserves a different message. So you've got your prospects who've not yet purchased. You've got your first-time customers who've got 1 order complete. You've got repeat customers who have 2 or more orders. VIP who are high-value customers, high frequency. Lapsed, so they've not recently done anything. We applied these things across all the stages. Tailor content so to what each subscriber has browsed or bought. Engagement level, define engagement using clicks, purchases, site activity, and recent opens. Treat opens cautiously because privacy features can inflate them, as we've mentioned. So segmentation isn't creating dozens of tiny audiences. It is giving materially different people a materially better message. And this is the thing that I keep talking about, is when we can break it down more. So if we go into more detail about someone's audit, we can look at different like customer cohorts and kind of where customers have come from, what different brackets of customers do what. And so if we really, really want to optimize our stuff further, what we can do is we can send specific campaigns and specific emails and make specific flows for these different little segments, because generally people will tell you to send campaigns to just kind of like your, let's say, 60-day engaged list. I would always say I agree with that, but if we can start optimizing even further than that and sending specific things to specific people, then even better. Because if we sell, let's say, clothing, we have menswear and women's wear. It's all well and good sending menswear and women's wear to everyone, but what if you sent menswear to men, women's wear to women? Can you tell me which would convert better? I know which one I think it would. So now we've moved finally through all of the email stuff. So we've gone through the pop-ups, what your pop-up numbers should look like. We've gone through the flows and what your flow numbers should look like. We've gone through the campaigns and kind of what your campaign should look like. Notice on all of them 3 though, I've not told you specifically how it should be designed. Not like maybe on the pop-up I have, and maybe a couple of things like click rates, open rates, but what I'm not trying to tell you is specific numbers for your brand. And again, I'll repeat this: you want to find the industry benchmark for your type of business, because e-commerce is so broad, and I hate it when I hear people telling everyone to do the exact same thing, and so I don't want to be that person. And so just check against all them things and come back and relay them to what we've spoken about here. Number 4, now we've moved away from email. If you've not, hopefully you've skipped to this part if you are not someone who needs to improve your email, but sections 1 and 2 should have helped you realize that, and hopefully on the YouTube timeline you were able to just skip to this bit. So when email cannot reach most customers, we find the mechanism that can. When email is not the main lever, we need to capture their identity in different ways, because we can't use things like a pop-up because there's not enough traffic. We need to have a way of direct communication, and we need to give them a reason to return. And so how have I found this is a lot more personal experience than it is general stats, this kind of stuff. So capture identity, QR codes. Can you send stuff out in the post when you give them a product? Can you send a greeting card saying thank you so much for buying? You're invited to join our. You don't need to say you're invited to join our mailing list. You can say something like, scan this code to opt into our members club, where we'll send you marketing about whatever it may be, like sales, exclusive discounts, etc. QR codes, packaging inserts, similar thing. You can also obviously use QR codes on your social media. So if you're running organic stuff, you can invite people in the same way, just on your stories or in videos. Or you can run things like ManyChat automation. So if you have valuable kind of things that you can give customers, like you can run ManyChat automations, which is, I'm not going to get into ManyChat now. It's a good email mechanism capture. It kind of requires you to have something valuable that you can give a customer and a big social presence. So that's for a future reference. And finally, owned accounts. So if you get in direct contact with people, or if you say run TikTok live, you can say to people in the TikTok lives where they can kind of to message you, and you can add them to these things. You can create content. You can build an audience through having a really strong content thing. So if you look at a brand like Lux Collective, so they do luxury resale, and the biggest thing that made them the size that they were before they went bust was purely the content that they did. And so they had a massive owned audience, and I don't think TikTok Shop was around then, but it is now. And they a massive amount of live viewers. They still would definitely do a massive amount of revenue each month because of their presence on social media. And then we need a way to directly communicate. So do we set up a WhatsApp group here? Do we have a WhatsApp group for a certain type of product? This is where we're looking at, if you sell a £20 consumable product, then you probably don't need a WhatsApp group to try and sell to people, and it's just going to be a bit pointless. Whereas if you have a kind of a much higher AOV brand that's you're constantly getting new stock in, so like the kind of luxury resellers of the world, you have a WhatsApp group or a Discord community or a Telegram chat that you can get people in and you can sell through that, then that's amazing. SMS is hard because it pretty much relates to email, and so we'll just ignore that for now. Community sits under the same thing as WhatsApp, in terms of you are trying to push people away from these kind of platforms like TikTok. Not push them away, because you still want them to kind of convert on there, but what you want an ultra personalized way to connect with them afterwards, so you can retain them, which is why something like WhatsApp is so good, because they have direct access to you, or like a Telegram chat, a Discord community, because people have direct access to you, and so whenever they think of whatever product you sell, they think of you immediately, and not the 5,000 other businesses that sell the same thing. And if we might not necessarily be able to do any of these things, or what we can do on top of them is we can give people reasons to return. So loyalty, which means offering people, like they do at coffee shops, or like any sort of platform like Costa, Subway, whatever it is, where you get, or McDonald's, where you get points for going back and returning and spending more, and eventually you get a return. Obviously the better the offer in terms of loyalty, the more people who are going to stick with it. If you're saying to people, for every £100 you spend with us, we'll give you £1, you're not going to convert people as well as saying, for every £100 you spend with us, we'll give you £10 or £20. So that's worth thinking about, worth testing. That would just be a loyalty program. Keep spending with us, we'll give you benefits. Referral is a really cool blend, I think, between retention and acquisition, because I think I learned it from money models from Hormozy, that you're basically going to keep customers coming back. Your kind of top customers, you give them referral codes and you tell them to go and refer people. And for every person they refer, they get store credit. Store credit's really good for you because it doesn't come out of your profit margin. And you, um, the people who they refer are new customers. You're acquiring customers, and you're just giving them a discount as long as you keep the store credit and the discount at certain rates, which you can work out. Which again, I'm saying, book a call with me, joint call on our audit. We'll tell you these numbers. We can look more specifically into it for your brand. You can do the economics on that, and you can find exactly what kind of numbers you need to be looking at. Subscription is similar. Most of the time, if you run a subscription brand, you're not going to have a catcher or a direct communication problem because you kind of have to sell subscriptions through something like Shopify. But in general, you might be able to set up kind of a different kind of subscription. Maybe if you sell that like through something like TikTok Shop, and you might have a different platform that that kind of runs your subscriptions for you, and you kind of then have flows and have things that set up to remind people to not churn. VIP access, I think, is one of the biggest levers, but it kind of you have to see how you can relate it to your brand, because different brands who have different types of products are going to have different type of VIP access. So let's say we had a brand that sells replica football shirts. So they sell like, I don't know, R9 shirts from 2000. And if you had a group, if you sold primarily on TikTok Shop, you can't capture any of the details. It requires you producing content, and it requires you going live or hoping people come across your shop in order to sell. If you get people from there to something like WhatsApp or to a Telegram group or to a Discord chat or whatever, you have owned communication to these people. And every time you get something, you can contact them and you can say, look at this, everyone in the chat, look at this, these are all the things I've got in, message me directly and we'll sort you out. It's probably one of the biggest improvements I've seen in one of the brands that I've worked with in terms of how well and how successful they are, is setting up this VIP member sort of access thing. Finally, last reason to return is stuff like early product drops. Doesn't mention other stuff like sales. Kind of, this is very reliant on your marketing or product calendar, and is kind of, it's most important for brands that are non-consumable, because if they're non-consumable, we need to give people a reason to buy them, rather than it's Tuesday, buy this product off me. If we say Christmas is coming up, buy this, or Father's Day is coming up, buy this, we're giving people a reason to buy. Or if we just say, like, if you join this, we'll give you a discount, people are going to join. So choose based on where customers buy and why they return. Do not prescribe every mechanism. Again, we're talking about, and we'll see in a minute, how we're going to try and diagnose this from the top down. We're going to try and find the most high leverage things and then work down from there. So here we go. Rank the findings and choose the first test. Do not present 45 equal problems. Present a ranked diagnosis with a clear first action. So for each finding, state the number or observation, what it might mean, the mechanism connecting it to revenue, the next place to investigate, the first test. Then with the priority order, measurement blockers, dominant commercial constraint, blockers inside the selected channel, fast, high confidence tests, longer term optimization. So we need to look at anything that is stopping us measuring the success or kind of the numbers that we want to find. That's going to be a priority to solve that first, because we need to find numbers. Then we need to find if there's a dominant commercial constraint, which basically means places like TikTok Shop, eBay, whatnot, aren't letting us have the communications. Blockers inside of the selected channel. So for whatever reason, there might be ways where you're unable to contact your customers, you're unable to deliberately try and help them retain or prevent churn. Then we're going to run the fast, high confidence test, ones that we know are going to work. Then longer term, we think about A/B testing, specific, like one email versus the other in a welcome flow. Just mentions here again, deliverability becomes urgent when email is a select opportunity. It is not automatically the second priority for a marketplace-led brand. That's just basically stating that deliverability, if email is your biggest thing, is the most important, but most people both have it set up and it's fine. I don't know why, sorry. Yeah, I can't put it on there because it doesn't necessarily affect everyone. So now we've ranked everything. And so we're going to look back to that example we gave from the past. So imagine we were looking at brand, I think it was brand B. So it was the brand that doesn't have any owned access. They kind of don't have much store. They don't have many people viewing their store. And so if I was to audit their brand, here's what I would kind of look for. So priority 1, most customers become invisible after the marketplace purchase. So most total revenue occurs outside of the Shopify store itself. Interpretation, the largest customer group cannot be reached reliably after the first transaction. So the next investigation was marketplace to owned, capture, and VIP access. So I hope you can notice what I've done is I've gone through kind of what might be happening, how you can interpret it, and then how you investigate it. So you should have, if you go back through, you'll be able to look at these things. So what evidence do you have? So all the things that you can look for evidence at the top, all the ways you can interpret it, and then here are the ways that you might be able to test it. So notice here how much more valuable priority 1 should be in comparison to priority 2 and 3. And this just shows like priority 1, if you could sit there and optimize these priority 2 and 3 for a year, and you could do priority 1 for 1 day and make more money off it. Priority 2, the owned store pop-up converts to 2.5%. It sits below the 4% directional benchmark. Interpretation, the brand is failing to identify enough of the visitors it does own. First test the offer and format against the existing version, i.e. test the pop-up. That is so much less valuable in terms of the hours to money ratio, hours to revenue ratio, that it's just ridiculous. But if you were to never like look and try and deliberately understand this, then you're just always going to be stuck behind. Priority 3, the final welcome email is the strongest. So notice how this pop-up is clearly a pop-up that affects everyone, is going to be more important. Sorry, not even everyone. The pop-up affects who goes into the welcome flow. So if you were to try and solve the welcome flow, last email welcome flow being the strongest, then you're going to solve something with a bottleneck behind it. No one's flowing into the welcome flow, so why would you try and solve the welcome flow when no one's flowing into it? So last one, we've solved this thing which opens up the door to solve priority 3. The final welcome email is the strongest. Evidence, performance is still rising at the end of a sequence. Interpretation, there may still be additional intent left after the final message. And so the test, add 1 proof-led email against the existing control. I hope you can kind of see where we're going with this. I think it's kind of flowing all right. Maybe I've not explained it too well. So here's what you want to be doing. So you want to be going in. This is going to be what your finished audit look like. Priority, evidence, what it might mean, next investigation, first test. So if we go back to the thingy before, the slide before, I think even before that, here you go. You're going to find for each of these, and you're going to write all of them down, every single one. Every single observation you can find, you're going to write down. Then you're going to see what might that mean, what mechanism might be connecting it to the revenue, what do you need to investigate based off of that, and then what would you test? And so it's important to do with this all at once, because what can sometimes happen is you might have a terrible welcome flow that just like the revenue per recipient is like 1p, right? Or less, virtually nothing, 0.01p per recipient. So your indication would be initially, which I suppose in a way would be the right thing, is, well, we need to optimize our welcome flow. We need to rebuild our welcome flow urgently. But if you also have an issue that your pop-up is converting at 0.05%, then which would you imagine is the highest lever? Because if you don't sort your pop-up out, no one's going to go into your welcome flow anyway. So what's the point of optimizing for it? And so this is why we write all of them down, and then we kind of map that customer journey through, where we're like, right, solve the pop-up, because a pop-up, once we've the pop-up solved, then people are going into the welcome flow. We know that's happening, so now we can sort out the welcome flow. And yeah, I suppose that's more with email than it is anything else. But you really have to think kind of what's going to make me the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time possible, and then you get into optimizing later on. And so all I would say is just to fill this out as much as you can. Don't worry about the order when you first build it, and then you prioritize after the first order. So here's what we would do in a 20-minute discovery call. Minutes 0 to 5, it may be 20 to 30 minutes, let's just say. Minutes 0 to 5, revenue map, product model, AOV, returning customers. Minutes 5 to 20, we'd see your Shopify traffic, your email percentage, your list size, and your pop-up. Minutes 10 to 15, we'd see your flow versus campaign revenue, your core flows, your strongest assets. Minutes 15 to 18, we'd look at your deliverability, segmentation, sending frequency. Minutes 18 to 20, rank the 3 biggest leaks and explain what the deeper strategy should or would investigate. So I've gone through this in much more detail. In general, on the surface, you can look through these things in a 15 to 20-minute session, and when you spend enough time doing it, you can spot them quite quickly. But the big thing for me is just kind of is first of all, like, go through this, and then we'll kind of talk about it more, which is, where does the total revenue come from? Can the brand identify and contact most customers? Is email underperforming, healthy, or masking an acquisition problem? What should order 2 look like? Are measurement and deliverability trustworthy? Is enough traffic being captured? If you can answer all of these, you know exactly how to solve them, then you are in a position where you can just scale your attention, your LTV massively, and you can just start spending a shitload on ads because your customers are so well retained they never want to leave. They're begging you to buy again. If not, you probably need to put some more retention mechanisms in place. And if you want us to help you with that, book a discovery call with us. Sorry, I've missed the rest of them. 7, do the right flows exist in Fire? What does performance inside each flow reveal? Are campaigns useful, frequent, and safely segmented? Is another retention mechanism structurally better? And which finding has the highest commercial priority? So 12, after answering all of them 11, what is the first test? Now, you can see from that how it's very easy for people to tell you that you need to send more campaigns, you need to rebuild your flows, you need to get a better performing pop-up, but you don't know if you need to do that because you don't know what really is going to move the needle for you. And this is just kind of the bit that I don't like and I kind of struggle with, is everyone will tell you like, oh, look at this, look how cool this designed email is, like look at all these different things, and they generally just aren't going to be the things that are going to make you more money. And I know what I've spoken to e-commerce founders. I guarantee, if I asked you, whoever's watching this video, do you want to have a better designed email or do you want to make more money? I would imagine you would say, I want to make more money. And so maybe creative in terms of your email comes at some point, but it's probably not the biggest lever mover. And so I just kind of wanted to make this video to kind of help you understand that. So last thing before we go, diagnose before you prescribe. Look at the commercial picture, find the constraint, then choose the channel. If you want me to run this exact process for your brand, click the link in the description and book a free discovery call. Like I say, totally free. I would hope you would get a lot of value from it, and you could go away from it not wanting to work with us at all, and yet you know exactly what you need to do to increase your retention, your lifetime value, you know how to email better. If you just want to come on a call and say, Josh, how do I design better emails? Josh, how do I write better copy for my emails? How many emails should be in my flow? I will tell you, but I hope you can come, you can see kind of how our retention strategies work and you can use them for yourself. Thank you for watching. Sorry if I've been waffling a bit. Goodbye.